In this video, we're going to be looking at different types of guitars and which different types of guitars there are. If you're a complete beginner or you want to start looking at playing guitar and you've never, seen the different types, know what the different types are, and never picked up guitar in general, I'm going to be going over all the different types you can buy, all the different sizes, all the different styles, and to hopefully make it a little bit better or easier for you if you're trying to look for your first guitar. Okay, so the first guitar I want to look at is this one right here. It is a classical guitar. This is how it looks. If you've not seen one of these before. So this is a full-size classical guitar. So very quickly, well, what can I tell you about it that's different to other types of guitars? And we'll compare it to different types in a minute. You can see I've got some different ones next to me here. But this full-size classical, first of all, well, the design, really, the only thing that's different to other types of guitars is really the way the bridge on the guitar is designed. It's slightly different here, and also the tuners up here are a slightly different design. I mean, essentially they all do the same thing. All guitars, they all have strings, they all have the basic designs are the same. But this one, the main difference in terms of how it looks and how it sounds is to do with the strings specifically. In terms of strings, we've got free metal and free plastic strings. That's the main difference with classical guitars. And so that just gives a different sound, to other guitars that I'll talk about in a minute that have all metal strings. It just means you're going to get a different sound. They're hollow inside, there's nothing inside here, and they're generally quite light. They're generally the lightest guitars you can get compared to the other types, which I'll show you in a minute, which again, that gives it a different sound. But this is a full-size classical guitar. You can get different sizes, which I'll show you in a minute, but this is a full size, so really, ideal for adults or I guess teenagers, depending on how old you are, or how big you are. But generally, this is how it looks, and this is how it sounds. It's a bit of a lighter sound compared to some of the others we'll look at in a minute. So that's how that sounds roughly. Of course, they all can come in different, different styles, different colors. So that's an example of a full-size classical guitar. Okay, so here is essentially the same guitar, but a lot smaller, as you can see. In fact, if I just compare the two, just to show you very quickly, or as much as I can do, that's roughly, the size difference there. So what we've got here is, this is a 3/4 size classical guitar. So what does that mean? Well, it's just a smaller scale guitar. The one I showed you a minute ago was full size. This is 3/4 size, and I think it even says it inside there. So a bit smaller, designed for obviously, younger people, kids, depending on how old you are. This would be suitable for, someone in, primary school, junior school, that kind of age, and, in the UK, kind of year 4, 5, and 6, something like that. But essentially, it looks the same. It's a different color to the one I showed you a minute ago. But essentially, everything is exactly the same in terms of design, in terms of sound as well. Although this is smaller, so it's generally not going to be as loud, I guess. But you still have the same 6 strings. So all classical guitars are going to have free metal, free plastic. The brand of strings they use on different types of guitars are obviously going to be different depending on the company that makes them, but essentially they're the same design. So it's just going to sound, or it should sound, similar to the guitar I played before, but less loud, and, well, this is how it sounds. So similar in terms of sound, but again, it's not going to be as loud generally as a full-size guitar, because it's smaller, of course. But that is a 3/4 size classical guitar. These stickers are just because I use it for teaching. But again, these can come in all different colors, and this is a 3/4 size specifically. Now you can get half-size classical guitars as well, so it would be this but even smaller. So of course, depending on how old the person is that you're buying the guitar for, if they're in infant school or if they're very young, then even this might be too big. You might want to consider getting even smaller than this, which would be a half-size guitar. That's what you want to look for. Half-size classical guitar would be this, but a little bit smaller. Okay, so the next guitar I want to talk about is this one. This is an acoustic guitar. So slightly different to the classical. Some people get these two mixed up. So this is an acoustic guitar. The ones I showed you before were classical. There is quite a big difference. This one specifically, if it looks very big, that's because this specific model is a jumbo size acoustic guitar. What that means is it's slightly bigger than your average acoustic guitar. Generally it'd be, I don't know, roughly about, say, that much smaller, something like that. So this would be, this is a full size or jumbo size acoustic guitar. In general, they are, even the normal size types, they are a little bit bigger than a full size classical, but again, you can get all different shapes and sizes. Okay, so what's the main difference with these guitars then? Well, it's mainly the design and the strings. So first of all, the strings. What we've got is we've got 6 steel strings. Yeah, they're all metal strings, all made of steel, which is different to the classical guitars. Yeah, so the classical guitars had the last 3 strings, G, B, and E. They were plastic. These are all metal. So because of that, you're automatically going to get a different sound. It's normally going to be a bit brighter and most of the time a bit louder as well. This one specifically, because it is bigger, that means it's generally louder as well, of course, depending on how hard you hit the strings. But yeah, the strings and the size is going to make a difference, of course. This one, if you really dig into the strings, it can get very loud, if that's what you need. So apart from that, the only thing that's different, as you can see here on the bridge, it looks different to the classical guitar. If I just compare that, if we look at the bridge, hopefully you can see that. The bridge looks different, and also the tuning pegs, the tuners at the top look different. So on the acoustic guitar, the bridge and the way the strings are strung here on the bridge are a bit different design. Instead of being tied around, they go in some holes here, and then you've got some bridge pins that clip in there, and that holds the string in place. But the bridge, it does the same thing. It still just keeps the strings in there. Even though it looks different, it's doing the same job. And the tuners, they're just different design, but again, they just look different. So really, that's the only difference really. Again, you can get acoustic guitars that come in full size, 3/4 size, even half size as well. So again, that depends on the person you're buying it with, how big they are, how old they are. Again, this is bigger than normal, but there is a difference there between acoustic and classical. And finally, of course, you have electric guitars. This is my electric guitar. Of course, you can get loads of different designs. They all look completely different colors, different designs, different types of wood. But just bear in mind, if you do want to buy one of these, generally they're going to be a little bit more expensive depending on which one you go for compared to a basic classical or acoustic. But also bear in mind that if you don't buy the amp, the speaker that you need to connect it to and a cable, and you just buy the guitar, then it means you're not going to be able to plug it in, and this is how it's going to sound without those things. So, of course, it's going to be quite quiet because we don't have the sound hole here that we do have on the other guitars, which makes it nice and loud. Of course, electric guitar is designed to be plugged in to a speaker, to an amplifier. So if you buy the guitar without those, then you're not really going to be able to use it to its full potential. So just bear that in mind. Ideally, you want to buy a basic electric guitar similar to this, but also with a little practice amp or beginner's amplifier and a cable so that you can use it all how it's supposed to be used. Otherwise, this is the sound you're going to get, which is still fine, but it's quite quiet. And let's face it, if you want to buy an electric guitar, you want to plug it in. So this is a full-size electric guitar. You can get, as the classical and the acoustic, you can get half size, 3/4 size, which is just the same thing, but smaller scale, obviously for children, and depending on how old the person is. But again, with electric guitars, there is more variation. I'd say there is so many different designs. This is a Fender Stratocaster guitar, but they all look different. So which one to buy? Well, the choice is yours. There's no right or wrong really, but just bear in mind, if you are a beginner, if you've never played guitar before, you need to think, well, what is going to be the easiest for you to learn on? And not only that, but you want to think, well, what's going to be good? You don't want to buy something that's really cheap and really rubbish that it actually makes it more difficult to play, because that's not going to be fun for someone who's just learning. You want to make sure that whatever you buy, you want to make sure that it's going to be the easiest thing that person can learn on without giving them any more barriers on top of that, because learning guitar, learning an instrument is difficult anyway. So you want to make sure that your instrument is at least the easiest option that you can find, because imagine on top of that you then buy them an instrument that's too big or so cheap that it doesn't play properly. All that's going to do is frustrate the person that's playing, and to be honest, it's going to make them more likely to quit out of frustration. So you want to make sure that whatever you're buying is the most suitable for that person. And with guitars, really, as long as it stays in tune and as long as it's relatively easy to play for the person, then that's the most important thing. So what would I recommend? Well, I would say if you've never played guitar before, classical guitar is a good way to go, just because the strings are different. So you might want to start with a classical guitar just purely because the strings, I find, are a little bit easier to press down on, because you've got plastic strings for the last three instead of all metal like on an electric or acoustic. Generally, that's a little bit easier to press down for people when they're first starting. If you've got steel strings, they're a bit sharper, a bit harder to press. So a classical guitar is a good thing to start with, and then I would say move on to either a smaller electric or acoustic. But really there's no right or wrong. You can start with either. Just bear in mind that it is going to feel different no matter which one you go with. But just think, when you're first starting, you need to learn how to press down on the strings or on the frets. So to me, I would say classical, just purely because the strings are a little bit lighter and a little bit easier to press down, especially if you then get the right size, a smaller scale size, then that is generally going to be a good way to start. So a lot of students start with a classical guitar like this and then move on to a bigger, when they get older, a bigger acoustic or a bigger electric. But the choice really is yours. But I would say start with a classical. Make sure you get the right size. That's the most important thing, and then that way at least you know that it's suitable for that person. So in terms of sizes, well, what size is good for which person? Well, generally speaking, a half size or a 3/4 size guitar, no matter which type it is. If you're in infant school, if you're an infant, then you probably want to go with a half size guitar. If you're in junior school or primary school, you want to probably move up to a 3/4 size. And then when you're getting sort of into years 6, 7 and 8 or secondary school, that's when you can start thinking about a full size. Having said that, it is difficult to say exactly, because every person is bigger, smaller than others. If you're really big or tall for your age, you might be able to easily reach around on a full size guitar, whereas someone else your age might not be able to do that. So it's hard to say exactly for every single person. If you're this age, you get this size guitar, but generally speaking, the best thing to do is just go to a shop and try. If you've got a child that wants to learn guitar, give them a 3/4 size guitar similar to this one that I showed you, and just try it. Obviously put it right in front of them like this. You'll soon know straight away if it's way too big or way too small, just by the way it looks. If they can play it fine, if they can reach their hand all the way around and they think it's comfortable, then it's fine. If you put a full-size guitar in front of them like this and they can't really even reach around all the frets, or they're hunched over like this and they find it really uncomfortable because it's just too big, then don't get that guitar. It's as simple as that. Get that one later on when they're a bit older, a bit bigger. So you do have to kind of use your common sense with this, but really just don't go and buy, if your child is 7 or 8 years old, then logic says that this is gonna be extremely difficult to play. I have seen it unfortunately in the past where parents buy full-size acoustic guitars for a 6 or 7 year old kid that's just learning to play guitar, which is obviously not suitable, and it just makes it way too hard for them, and they just quit because they can't do it. So use your common sense. If you're really unsure, go to a shop, try out different ones, and if it's comfortable for them, then that's the right guitar for you to go for. Okay, so I hope that helped in showing you the different types of guitars and what the options are for you. Like I said, of course it depends on who you're buying the guitar for. Size is probably one of the most important things when you're first learning. But I hope that clears up some of the questions you might have been thinking when you're looking for a guitar.